Have you ever wondered if the big questions we're wrestling with today, about reality, happiness, how we should all live together, are actually new? Well, guess what? They're not. Not even close. We're going to take a journey to see how these ancient philosophical debates are, believe it or not, still shaping our world right now.
So our story kicks off in ancient Athens with this guy, Socrates, and he was a real character. He used to hang out in the marketplace, not to give big speeches, but just to ask people questions. And for him, a conversation was a huge success if it ended in, get this, total confusion. Because that moment of confusion meant you'd finally realized how little you actually knew. And that, right there, was the first step toward any real wisdom.
Yeah, he was known as the gadfly of Athens. You know what a gadfly is? It's that super annoying insect that stings a horse or a cow to get it to move. And that's exactly what Socrates did to people. He wasn't there to give you comfortable answers. His whole point was to sting you with a question that was so sharp, it woke you up from just sleepwalking through your own assumptions.
Now, Socrates didn't just ask a few questions. He basically opened the floodgates. His student, a guy named Plato, took on one of the biggest questions imaginable. What is truly real? Is the world that we see and touch, is that the whole story? Or is there something more going on?
Plato's answer was honestly pretty out there. He argued that this physical world that we experience with our senses, it's basically just a shadow. It's a flawed, cheap copy of a perfect, unchanging reality that you can only get to through pure reason and thinking, not by looking or touching. To explain this wild idea, Plato gave us this amazing story, the allegory of the cave. So picture this. There are these people who have been chained up inside a cave their entire lives, staring at a wall. Behind them, there's a fire, and people are walking past it, casting shadows on the wall. For these prisoners, those flickering shadows are reality. That's all they've ever known. The philosopher, Plato says, is the person who breaks the chains, struggles out of the cave, and sees the real world in the sunlight for the very first time. It's such a powerful way to think about moving from ignorance to actual understanding.
Okay, let's jump forward, way forward, like 2,000 years, to Immanuel Kant. He picked up this question about reality, but took it in a totally new direction. Kant said, look, we can never know reality as it truly is. Why? Because our own minds act like a filter. Our brain isn't just a passive camera recording the world, it's actively building our experience of it.
Here's a great way to think about it. It's as if we're all born wearing a pair of glasses that we can never, ever take off. We have no idea what the world looks like without them. We can only see the world through them. For Kant, even basic things like space and time aren't really out there in the world. Nope. They're part of the software our mind uses to make sense of everything. It's a mind-bending idea, and it's an early look at concepts we now talk about all the time, like cognitive biases.
So, if we can't even be 100% sure what's real, then how on earth are we supposed to figure out how to live a good life? This is the huge question at the heart of ethics, and back in the ancient world, they had some very different ideas about it.
You basically had two major schools of thought. First, the Stoics. They believed that a good life was all about inner peace. And you find that peace by focusing only on what you can actually control, your own thoughts, your own reactions, and just learning to be okay with everything else. On the other hand, you had the Epicureans. For them, the goal was happiness, plain and simple. They thought you could get it by satisfying simple desires and using the memories of good times to get you through the bad ones.
Now, this idea of happiness got a massive update in the 19th century with Jeremy Bentham and his idea of utilitarianism. It was a pretty revolutionary thought. What if morality isn't about some complicated set of rules, but about a simple calculation? The right thing to do is just whatever creates the most happiness for the most people. It's almost like ethics with a spreadsheet.
But is just maximizing pleasure, is that really the whole story? The philosopher Robert Nozick came up with this brilliant thought experiment to challenge that. Imagine there's a machine, an experience machine. You can plug into it, and it will give you a lifetime of perfect pleasure. You could be a rock star, a brilliant scientist, fall in love, whatever you want. It would all feel completely real. A hardcore utilitarian might say, you should plug in. But would you? Most people, when they really think about it, say no, which suggests we want more out of life than just good feelings. We want it to be real.
And that leads us away from just thinking about ourselves and onto a much bigger stage, politics. I mean, it's one thing to figure out your own life, but how do we organize an entire society full of people who all want different things?
Well, two thinkers, Thomas Hobbes and Jean-Jacques Rousseau,
came at this from completely opposite directions. Hobbes had a pretty dark view of people. He thought we're all fundamentally selfish, and without a powerful government to keep us in line, life would be chaos. Rousseau, on the other hand, was way more optimistic. He believed we're born good and free, but that society, with all its rules and competition, is what messes us up and puts us in chains.
Hobbes had this famous idea of a state of nature, what life would be like before any laws or rulers. And for him, it was terrifying. It would be a constant war of everybody against everybody, a life of total fear, where things are, in his famous words, nasty, brutish, and short.
And of course, if you have these totally different views of human nature, you're going to come up with wildly different solutions. Hobbes said we need to create a leviathan, a super powerful government, and we should give up a lot of our freedom to it just so we can have safety and order. But Rousseau imagined something else entirely, a society guided by the general will, where all citizens work together for the common good.
So, we've jumped from reality to ethics to politics. But here's the thing. The story of philosophy isn't over. It's not just something in a history book. That spirit of the gadfly, that Socratic tradition of asking tough, uncomfortable questions, it's still very much alive today. Let me give you a modern example. The philosopher Peter Singer. He is, in many ways, a perfect modern-day gadfly. He loves to challenge our most comfortable, deeply held beliefs about how we should be living.
Singer presents us with this really powerful challenge. Okay, imagine you're walking past a shallow pond, and you see a small child drowning. Of course, you jump in and save them, even if it meant ruining your brand new, expensive shoes. Easy choice, right? A kid's life is obviously worth more than shoes. But then, he points out that for the exact same amount of money as those shoes, you could donate to a charity and save a child's life on the other side of the world from a preventable disease. And his question is simple but devastating. What's the real moral difference between those two situations? Why does distance suddenly seem to matter so much?
And that right there is the power of philosophy. From Socrates all the way to Singer, its greatest gift isn't a neat little package of answers. It's a toolkit for learning how to ask better, sharper, more honest questions. It's about turning a critical eye back on ourselves and the way we live. So I guess the only real question left is, what unexamined belief will you start questioning today?